Perfect. Okay. We'll start with making a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shakol neh b'vorei. I'm sorry about the Havara. You have to forgive me and bear with me on this one. Okay, it's a big zchut to be here. Rabbi Yisai, speak about the halachas of Eiruv in general, and to some degree the halacha of the Eiruv we have in Los Angeles. Just as a little bit of a background, I Baruch Hashem had this course of learning in the Link Kollel already for the past 7 years, and along my my campaign of learning there, I learned Hilchos Eruvin together with together with the other Kollel members, with the Lebar, Shlita, with the Rama Genavon, and the Chashim Avrechim. And after basically towards the end of the learning of Eruvin, I was approached by Rabbi Sharwitsky. He's the official Rav of the whole project, and they were shorthanded. And Baruch Hashem, ever since then, so I've been 2.5 years, 3 years, and I've been working on the Eiruv, and it's incredible to see how much you learn from just being involved, not just being involved in halacha, more than just learning it. There's so many shilas and so many different things that come up from being out there and doing it hands-on, the Maisa, that you wouldn't get just from the learning of it. So it's the biggest good. I have the big heart to Akash Baruch Hu for that, and to my family members who allow me Sunday morning, even though they're off and they don't have their father there. I'm busy running around checking the Eiruv. I'll just a point of interest, the Eiruv, just to make sure that everyone's aware, the Eiruv we have in Los Angeles is composed of the freeways. The freeway system that we have, it starts with the 10 on the south side, the 10 freeway from Western Boulevard all the way to the 405 is followed up, the 405 freeway to the valley where it hits the 101 all the way to Cahuenga, and it goes down Western Santa Monica, and then Western Boulevard. That's all, and those are the way that it works is those three. I tried to bring the projector, a lot of pictures, but wasn't able to miss out there. The three sides, the south, the west, and the north, are all made out of mechitzot, actual walls, chain link fence and sound wall that runs along the freeway. And the eastern side, which is composed primarily of Western Boulevard, is made out of Trota Pesach. We'll talk a little bit about that. Trota Pesach is basically you have two poles and string across the top. That has a status of a mechitza in halakha. We'll talk about that more b'hemshech. Anyway, that is the Eiruv. And yes, I have the sort of checking it every week on Sundays and on Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday, we check the lines, we check the strings. And on Sundays, we check the actual mechitzot to make sure that they're not broken. The amount of time it takes to check the Eiruv is actually not what people think. The checking we do on Sunday takes on average 4 to 5 months because it's so big. It's a huge area. It's around 8-9 miles in diameter. Think about it. So it takes us about 4 or 5 months to go through the whole thing. We do 2-hour treks every Sunday morning, going piece by piece, sometimes driving. Most of the time is hiking, going through brush and encountering all kinds of not wanted people. And I have stories regarding that. It's a shame at the end if we have time for that. It's not a fun. Shmuel can attest to that. I'll let you know what that's like. And if anyone ever wants to join, and if you're not Australia, I owe him he asked me to take him a Mr. one day. Then he'll wish he didn't ask me. That's that. Wednesday, Thursday, we check the lines to make sure nothing's broken. If something's broken, they'll fix it. And you'll never know if something's broken because they always fix it on Thursday night. And by the time Shabbos around, you look at the emails, Eiruv is up. You think that nothing ever happened. The truth is, almost every week they do a tikkun. They fix something almost every week. So just to be aware of that, it's an interesting point of interest. Almost every tikkun, not always is the tikkun they do something that if it would not be there otherwise would be problematic. But almost every week they do a tikkun. I had this for the first time ever after 2.5 years of doing last 2 Thursday nights ago to go out to fix something myself with the crew. I'm the part of the Rabbanos. I don't do the fixing. Sometimes I do fixing on the fly when I'm there, but on Thursday nights I never go. Last 2 Thursday nights ago I went because there was some question in terms of what they didn't understand what the problem was. I went there to show them myself. And Baruch Hashem, towards the end, a homeless guy came. It was pitch black, and some homeless guy came with his dog. He's barking at us, very scary. And Baruch Hashem, he survived to tell the tale. And all for you guys who gives the Eiruv. Anyway, so that's enough about me. Let's talk about the Eiruv. So, so again, what we're dealing with? We're dealing with Malacha Saitzah. there's something called Shabbos, Shabbat, and there are 39 malachot on Shabbat. One of them is carrying. Okay, you're not allowed to carry. What is carrying? Hotzah. The Gemara says there's something called Hotzah, Haknasa, Moshet, Mavir. There's all different terminologies for carrying on Shabbat. It means transferring an item either by throwing or carrying it or transferring it, handing it over from Rishut HaRabim to Rishut HaYachid or for Amot to Rishut HaRabim. Okay, we'll explain all those terminologies in a moment. Okay, and fine. So, what is the source for this in this halacha? So the Mishnah Berurah brings in Siman Shemem Hey the Lashon of the Rambam Perek Yud Bet halacha chet. Carrying from one jurisdiction to another is from the fathers of Malachot. Me'avot Malachot Harihu Omer B'Torah Ish v'Isha Al Yasu Od Malacha Mot HaKodesh. Man or woman. Okay, so it's also even for women to carry. Can't be make all the wives. If it's whatever it is, it's for you and your wife. Ish v'Isha. You should not do any more malacha or the Trumat HaKodesh. This is referring to the nidavot that they bring for the building of the Mikdash, for the Mishkan. It says that they had enough money, enough donations, stop giving, and it says that the malacha was enough. So what was the malacha they were doing? We understand that they were taking their items from their houses, from their tents, their ohalim, to the jurisdiction of Moshe Rabbeinu Shevet Levi. So the Rambam explains, the Mishnah Berurah explains this, that the tents of the Bnei Israel are considered to be private domain Rishut HaYachid, and they're transferring the items, their presents, their gifts to the public domain where Moshe Rabbeinu resided. That's referred to Shevet Levi, that Machne Leviah. That's Rishut HaRabim. That's a place where everyone goes, of course, because everyone comes to learn. So it's Rishut HaRabim. That's where everyone goes. So you see there that it's called Melacha, and therefore you can't do it on Shabbat. So it's interesting to note that we compare that just like you can't go from Yachid to Rabim, you also can't do from Rabim to Yachid. We understand that it's the same, it has the same halakha. And the other idea of carrying four amot, 4 cubits, how far that is, let's say somewhere between 6 and 8 feet in the Rishut Rabim, even if you don't go from one Rishut to another Rishut, is also a malacha d'oraita. That's the Gemara says is based on Masorah, Allah Moshe Misinai, Moshe Rabbeinu. We don't have sources in scripture for that, but that's also d'oraita. And since it's d'oraita, it's malacha like any other malacha on Shabbat. For violating it, the mezid is skilah, with warning and witnesses, and without that, it's karet. And mishogi is chayv b'chatat, just like any other malacha. What's interesting is, despite the fact that it seems to be what the Rishonim say, a malacha which is kind of weak because you're not really changing anything physically, like you're not boneh, you're not building, you're not making a fire, you're not cooking, you're not creating anything, you're doing something which is just transferring an item from one jurisdiction to another. But nevertheless, it comes with its own pasuk. All the other 39 malachot don't have any pasukim. It's all just learned out from the Mishkan, whatever they did there. So just figure it out, and we figured out. Chazal, Chachamim told us what they are. But carrying actually has its own pasuk for it. So it's interesting what that is. I think the Lechem Mishnah on the bottom of the Rambam explains that since it's a weak melacha without a pasuk, it never would have been considered one of the chashuv things, and therefore you need that pasuk. Anyway, that's as far as carrying goes. Okay, so what are the 4 different jurisdictions of Shabbat? In order to understand better the malacha of carrying on Shabbat, you have to understand that there are 4 different jurisdictions of Shabbat. We're talking about carrying from one reshut to another reshut, one jurisdiction. What are the 4 different jurisdictions? 2 of them are d'oraita, and 2 of them are the Rabbanan, let's say. But that's how they are categorized. So it was hot water. Warm water. Okay, so the 4 Reshuyot are Reshut HaRabim, Reshut HaYachid, a Carmelite, and a Makam Petor. Makam Petor. I'm not exactly sure the right pronunciation. The spelling in all this part is Pator, but everyone says Petor, so I'll just say like everyone, Petor. So what are these 4? B'kitzur, what are these 4? We're going to go in depth into Reshut HaRabim and Reshut HaYachid, but just to go B'kitzur, to understand the different terminologies. Reshut HaRabim is a place where the multitudes go. It's a place where it services the multitude. They go there, they have there. For example, big roads, stratospheres, cities, and marketplaces, places where the throngs of people go. That's called a Reshut HaRabim. Okay, so just off the bat, if a place is not servicing a Makom of Rabim, like nowadays the desert or the ocean, okay, Shulchan Aruch says, that is not Reshut HaRabim, because it's not a place where the multitude of people go and then service the multitudes. That's Reshut HaRabim. Reshut HaYachid means a place. It doesn't mean that it's a private domain. Don't make the mistake and think just because something is private and it's not Rishut Rabim, so it's automatically Rishut Yachid. That's a big mistake. It's a big misnomer. In order to be Rishut Yachid, you have to have mechitzot. You hear mechitza, you think, oh, we're in a shul. There's a thing separating us between the men and the women. No, mechitza is something very significant in halakha, in Shabbat, in other areas of halakha as well, in Hilchot Klayim. Whenever you need a separation in halakha regarding whatever it is, Eiruv is a primary topic. To separate between one reshut and another reshut, you need a wall, okay, a wall which stands on its own, doesn't blow in the wind, which is 10 tefachim tall, which is a machloket. If you machmir, it's up to 40 inches. Somewhere it could be anywhere between 32 and 40 plus inches, even, and has to be at least 4 tefachim wide, which is 12 to 16 inches wide. And Rishut Yachid is composed of, we'll see soon, Bezat Hashem, between 3 or 4 mechitzot. Most opinions hold 3 walls. Once you like a sukkah, right? If you have 3 walls, creates Rishut Yachid. And according to some opinions, you need 4, and according to some opinions, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. See soon, Bezat Hashem. Okay. So based on that, we understand better what we said before. If you carry from Rishut Yachid to Rishut Rabim, or vice versa, that is a chiyuv skila. So if we say, for example, that Los Angeles, let's just pretend for a moment that Los Angeles is Rishut Rabim, or the Olympic Boulevard or Pico Boulevard, let's assume it's Rishut Rabim, which very likely it is. You carry your baby bottle from your house to the street. So for that person is chayiv skila. Okay, they're gonna pelt him with stones until he dies, and if he doesn't, they'll push him off a cliff, and then they'll hang him afterwards. Okay, just because he wanted to bring his baby a bottle. Okay, just to understand what we're dealing with. Reshut. There are 2 other reshut. One is called Carmelit. The other is Makam Pator. What is that? A Carmelit is a place which is not Yachid and not Rabim. It's in between. Why is it not Rabim? It's not Rabim because it's a place that say that the multitude doesn't go. It's like the ocean or the midbar or an open field. It's a place where you don't have multitudes of people. It's not Rishut Yachid because it doesn't have the very important mechitzot that we talked about before. Okay, so it's not Rabim, not Yachid. What is the status of a Carmelit? The rabbi said that you're not allowed to carry there more than 4 amot. You can't carry from it to Yachid or from it to Rabim or vice versa, Rabbi to it or Yachid to it. You're not allowed to use it as Al Chumrot. Okay, that's Carmelit. Why is it called Carmelit? The word Carmel, there's few pshatim. The one that the Mishnah Berurah brings, Chavetz Chaim, says it's from the language of Carmel. Carmel is something that in the Torah is talking about grains of wheat, which are not totally dry, not totally robust. You can roll them with your fingers. So they're in between. So Carmelit is an in-between, Benoni type of thing. It's in between. That's why it gets that name Carmelit, because of Carmel. There's other pshatim as well, but that's the simple pshat. Okay? So for example, if for some reason Pico Boulevard is not going to classify as Rishut Rabim based on what we'll see, so then by default, it will automatically be what we call a Carmelit. Okay? Fine. Or another example, a person's front, like based on what we said before, a person's yard, let's say if it's not surrounded by walls, since the place where the Rabbim don't go, it's my private place where people don't go, so it's automatically a Carmelit. The other thing we're not going to talk about too much is a little complicated application, but something called Makam Pator, a free zone. Okay, everyone likes free things, right? What's better than free? The only thing better than something free is if it's really, really cheap, right? I think so. Certain enjoyment from being so cheap. Anyway, what's a Makam Pator? What's this free zone? So free zone is a place which doesn't have Yachid Rabim, and the rabbis said, you know what? It's not even chashuv enough to be a Carmelit, and therefore it's free. You could carry to it, you can carry from it, and you can carry in it as much as you want. However, there's one caveat that the rabbis say: you cannot utilize it as a stopping place to go from Yachid Rabim. Let's say, oh, a great idea. I want to carry from Yachid Rabim. Oh, I have a Makam Pator next to my house. No problem. I'll just go there first and then go to Rabim afterwards. So Rabbi said, sorry, Charlie, you can't do that. If your name is Charlie or a different name, no one can do it. What's one example of Makam Pator? So we're gonna, I don't know if we'll see too much, but the halacha says that Rishut Rabim actually only extends 10 tefachim above the ground. So if you're standing in Pico Robertson, so basically a third of your body is already in the airspace above the Rishut Rabim. Only 10 tefachim, 40 inches off the ground is Rishut Rabim. Above that is a Makam Pator. So a person wants to fly in the air, so then technically he could carry over there without a problem. This regards to Tchumim as well, but we're not getting into that. But maybe more practical application. Let's say you have a post which is very thin and it's standing straight up in the Rishut Rabim. A good example is a parking meter. A parking meter is taller than 10 tefachim. Okay, it's very small, so it's not going to be a carmelit. The top of it is going to be a makam betor. So it's a free zone. So if a person finds something, he can utilize that to put on, and he's not over any Isur D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan by putting it on a parking meter, just as an example. Okay. Now, those are the 4 shiot b'kitzur. Now we're going to go into Shut Rabim Barichut. You're going to understand a little bit better. There's many conditions that need to be fulfilled. Not so many, but there are many conditions that need to be fulfilled in order for someone to have the status of a Shut Rabim. And the reason for that is because, like all the melachot, we understand that the source of them is the Mishkan. And so too here, with coming to caring, it works a little differently. The source of caring is, and the paradigm for what is called Shut Rabim is the encampment of the Jews that they had in the desert. The Gemara calls it the Diglei Hamidbar. Why it calls it the flags, Diglei Hamidbar, I'm not sure. The encampment of the Jews in the desert. Not sure what's with the Digalim, but that's what the Gemara calls it. The Diglei Hamidbar is the precedent for Shut Rabim. And therefore, as follows, I have here 5 different things. It might be that there's actually more. Number 1, has to be 16 amot wide. If it's not 16 amot wide, so then it's not going to be Shut Rabim. If it's small alleyway, very thin, so it's automatically not Shut Rabim. It cannot be covered, just like in the desert. The desert was not covered; there was no roof. Okay, so as well, any area that's covered. So I guess if you have some marketplace, that I think maybe in the Shuk Machane Yehuda could be that they have. I think they have some type of roof, some kind of right canopy. So technically speaking, that should eliminate the status of Shut Rabim in that place. Number 3 is a very interesting and very helpful. This is one of the main ideas that the kulot are based on. It has to be mufulash mishar lashar. It has to be a thoroughfare from gate to gate. So did you send out the pictures? Okay, so I'll get back to this in a moment. You have to look at the pictures that were sent out on the WhatsApp. It has to be a thoroughfare. Well, Mr. Shem, we'll get back to that. But just b'kitzur, you have to be open from one side to the other side. If you have the 2 doors are not opposite each other, or Shut Rabim, let's say it's a city, the 2 doors, the entrance and the exit are not opposite each other, so then it's also not Shut Rabim. Number 4, one of the most talked about element is, some say that the Shulchan Aruch says that you have to have 600,000 people traversing it every single day. Whether it's dafka every day or once in a while is a big question. Not really going to get into that. But the language of the Shulchan Aruch is 600,000 that go traverse it every single day. Sorry? Now the Shulchan Aruch says Yesh Omrim. Don't worry, that's the primary topic of this year. We're going to talk about it. And the Ramah says you should just know that there's one more thing, in order for it to be Shut Rabim, the doors are not locked at night. Okay, we have a nice city that has walls around it, let's say, or not. Well, let's say there's walls, and the 2 doorways are opposite each other, but there are doors that are locked at night, or according to some, even if they can be locked at night, then that already takes away the status of Shut Rabim. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment, exactly what that's about. Okay, now let's go through each one at a time. 16 amot. What's with the 16 amot? So the Gemara says very interestingly that the pathway that the wagons traveled in the desert encompassed 16 amot. Why? How do you know? Because each wagon was 5 amot wide, and there was 2 side by side. So 5 plus 5 is 10, and the area in between was another 5. That's 15. And then on the side you had a levi on each side, and each one took up half an amma. I guess it's a standard. I guess they were 10 people. So that's another amma. So altogether you have 16. Very good. Okay, someone's listening. You have 16 amot for the pathway of the wagons. So we learn from there that in order to be a Shut Rabim, has to be at least 16 amot wide. Okay, covered. Again, the encampment of the desert didn't have any covering. Therefore, in order for it to be Shut Rabim, it has to be not covered. Okay. So I saw someone say that if it's partially covered, let's say part of the 16 is covered, part's not covered. So someone to say that even if most of it is covered, but the part that's not covered is Rishut Rabim, even though you need the part that's covered to add to the 16. If you have altogether 20, and let's say 10, or let's say you have 16 and 10 of them are covered. So even if the 10 is not Rishut Rabim, but the other 6 are going to be Rishut Rabim because it's 16 amot wide and that spot's not covered, In other words, the fact that it's mostly covered is not going to take away from the status of the Rabim. Okay. And also what's called a cover, some say that it's only a permanent covering. If it's a temporary covering, doesn't count. Like what's with a baby stroller? So some want to say that a agala is automatically an area which is not a Reshut Rabim, because it has an awning. So the awning is covered. So now that spot is not Reshut Rabim. That's one idea that's mentioned. Others argue, but just to throw that out as a nice idea. Okay, let's talk about Mufulash. So if you look at the picture that was sent to you, you will see it's a picture from the Or Letzion. It looks like this. You only have the picture, it was cropped. The third picture. Okay. So if you'll see over here, this looks like Olympic Boulevard. Anyone that drove down Olympic Boulevard knows that once you get on the way to Westwood, you know that it curves, right? So this is a picture of Olympic Boulevard. So why is this significant? Because the Shulchan Aruch says in order for something to be Reshut Rabim, it's got to be open from side to side. In other words, it's a straight trajectory. You can draw a straight line from one side to the other. If it bends, so then it automatically loses its status of Reshut Rabim, which is a huge savior, this svara, to make something now Reshut Rabim, making Eiruv more possible. What is the logic behind that? We're going to say a svara towards the middle end of this year, but right now we'll mention what Rashi says in Shabbat, Daf Vav Amud Bet, that Yerushalayim, in the times of the Gemara understood, that Yerushalayim was the had a Reshut Rabim going through the middle of it, and it was situated between two gates which were both opposite each other. In other words, you draw a straight line from one gate to the other, dafka straight and open on both sides. Otherwise, it would not have the status of Reshut Rabim. That's what Rashi says in Shabbat. The Yaakov Bloy in Tivot Shabbat quotes a Meiri saying that the reason behind this is because if the people, the Reshut Rabim, have to twist and turn, so that's not called Reshut Rabim. We have this idea that Reshut Rabim has to be easily traversed, just in the midbar. There was nothing in your way, right? The clouds knocked down everything. There was easy, smooth sailing, easily traversed. If the Reshut Rabim, it needs to be twisting and turning, so then that's not called Reshut Rabim. Happens to be that Moshe Feinstein is not so crazy about this svara, because as long as there's no actual hindrance, as long as you can go easily, doesn't make so much sense to say that that's not called Reshut Rabim. It's you just turn your wheel a little bit, you're good. But others will say no, that as long as it's not super smooth without any problem at all, you automatically lose the status of Reshut Rabim. Obviously, if it's a little bit off, you can't say that. Okay, there's some leeway. But if it's kind of like in the picture, Olympic Boulevard, that is a simple understanding, and that's already not covered Reshut Rabim. There's another idea behind this. We'll say Bezat Hashem soon. Fine. Yeah, but there was no. Oh, so the midbar didn't have any walls. So someone to say that this svara is only if there's walls, right? Okay. We have to be careful. Okay. I didn't say no question, right? Okay. So fine. Now the idea that we're going to go a little bit out of order because the 600,000 is the touchy topic. So we're going to talk about the doors. So the doors are closed at night is in machloket. If it has to be closable or mamash closed at night. I lived on Soroskin Boulevard in the beginning of my marriage, and I had no idea what was sitting there at the end of the street. There's this big yellow thing with a big doorpost. Oh, that I mamash had no idea what it was, and I didn't even think to ask anyone what it was. But when I learned Hilchot Eruvin, like a light bulb went off in my head. Oh, it's a Tzurata Pesach, which stops, right, which creates the third wall, and it also has a door, and they close it on Shabbat night, Friday night, throughout Shabbat, it would be closed. Maybe it was because keeping cars out till Shabbat. So that's not the reason, because they want for the Eiruv. Because in order for some not to be Reshut Rabim, according to what the Ramah says is what and Mishnah Berurah says that that's the Haskama of Maran Shulchan Aruch, that the doors have to actually be closed at night in order for it not to be Reshut Rabim. Why? Because in order to be similar to the encampment in the desert, there was no hindrance whatsoever, and there was open access whenever you wanted. And if the doors are closed, maybe even able to be closed, that already makes it not like Reshut Rabim, because you don't have open access as much as you want. It's also not so clear exactly what the what the measurement, what the shiur is for this. Close the night. How long? How much can you close it just for a minute and that's it? Or does that have to be closed the whole, or every night, or maybe just Friday night? Maybe that's enough. So those are all very good questions. I don't know the answer. Okay. Fine. Now let's get to 600,000. So this is a huge machloket between the Rishonim and the Poskim. We need this condition, and not only that, but how do you understand the dynamic of 600,000? Even if you agree that you need it, but what's called 600,000? Okay, so just to list a few of the big names that say you need 600,000. It is the Bahag, Rashi, and the Rosh, the Smag, the Smak. The list of Rishonim is all quoted in all the Poskim. You can see for yourself. They hold that in order for Tushar the Rabbim, you need 600,000. And seemingly the Svara is because, again, once again, we learned from the encampment in the desert that just like there, they had 600,000, you also need, even though there was more than 600,000, there was maybe approximately 3 million. However, the number that was given to us in the Torah was 600,000, so that's what counts. Some poskim want to discuss like who counts for 600,000. Is it only men above 20? What about goyim? I think the primary consensus is that all people count for 600,000, even though we're trying to make it similar to the Midbar, so a little bit non-consistent with that, but that's what comes out. Fine. The other Rishonim are the Rambam, Ramban, Rajba, Ran, Rivash, and many others. They all hold that no, Shutar Rabim does not need 600,000 as long as it's a public place, public access. Then you are in Eiruv Shutar Rabim. So who do we go like? Huge machlokes Rishonim and Poskim. So we'll start with the Magen Avraham and the Taz. The Poskim Ashkenazim say they both hold that Bikar Halacha, according to most Poskim, is to be Mekel, the whole that you need 600,000. And not only that, well, the Magen Avraham says that's even the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, because the Shulchan Aruch says regarding leaving your house for women, right? We said before, women have the prohibition of carrying as well, Ishbisha. If they go out of the house with jewelry, there's a problem because we are afraid that maybe she's going to take off the jewelry and show it to her friend. That's what it says in Halacha in the Gemara. And the Shulchan Aruch says that in Siman Shin Gimel that nowadays women go out with jewelry. What do they rely on? They rely on the fact that nowadays we don't have a Shutar Rabim the right anymore. Many Rishonim say this line, nowadays we don't have a Shutar Rabim. It's based on this opinion that you need 600,000. That's what Maran Shulchan Aruch says over there in Shin Gimel. The Magen Avraham says based on this, oh look, see even Shulchan Aruch himself holds that you need 600,000 in order to be Shutar Rabim. Okay, this is a chidush, what the Magen Avraham says. The Taz doesn't quote the Shulchan Aruch, but they both hold that according to most poskim, we are mekel with this idea. Most Achronim argue though Magen Avraham. They say that Maran Shulchan Aruch says very clearly, or according to the Klalim of Maran in Shin Mem Hey, Yisotem. First he says all these different conditions for Shutar Rabim, 16 amot, roof, shalashar, and Yeshomrim that you need also have Shishim Ribon. So according to the Kalim, Stam V'yesh should go with the Stam. He only brings the Yeshomrim afterwards that you need 600,000. So if you read like a good student of Maran Shulchan Aruch, so okay, you don't need 600,000, and it's a sort. So well, fine. So that's a big machloket. Magen Avraham wants to say no, he's mekel. The most Achronim argue. The Mishnah Berurah among them says no. Many places is contradicted, and the Shita of Shulchan Aruch is no, that you do not need 600,000, and it's still Shutar Rabim. So B'ezras Hashem, we'll see what the Rebbe Vadia says regarding Shita and what it's say about regarding Shita of Shulchan Aruch regarding this. Okay, so first we'll say they go with the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. What does the Mishnah Berurah say? The Chavetz Chaim in the Bir Halacha says that a person needs to be machmir. He has to assume that you don't need 600,000, but we don't have power to argue against the ones that want to be lenient. But Avadaya Yarei Shemayim has to be machmir. That's his psak. So he says if you want to have Yarei Shemayim, you have to be machmir in this question. But if someone's mekel, you don't yell at him. So that's his language. However, even the Mishnah Berurah himself, even though he comes out seemingly more machmir in this question, he brings the Eiruv Rabbah, which is also, I see that the Sephardi Poskim Manei want to say, go like this as well, that if you have some kind of other svara, why it's not a Shutar Rabim, you can put the two together and you can rely on it. You can rely on this shita that you need 600,000, if you have some other svara to rely on. For example, the Or L'Tzion wants to say, just give me a minute. I'll get to that. Actually, I'll get to that in a moment. Okay. Also, let me just finish with the Mishnah Berurah. So he also testifies in Shin Samech Dalet, I think, that the minhag always in Europe was to make Eiruv, which relies on the leniency that you need 600,000. In other words, the way that they made Eiruvim with just a Tzurta Pesach, we'll get to that in a moment, was relying on this opinion that in order for it to not be Shurta Rabim, you need 600,000. All the small shtetla in villages in Europe did not have 600,000. That's what they relied on to create an Eiruv. So he testifies that was the minhag. Nevertheless, he says, but it's not the right thing. Okay, so it's interesting how that comes out. The Mishnah Berurah is not impressed by what people did. He holds that okay, it's based on something. You can't yell at them, but if you have your shemaim, you have to be machmir. Okay, very interesting. The Aruch HaShulchan says the opposite. He says no, that the minhag is very holy, and it's as if a bat kol came out and said that this is the right halakha. Amazing. I just saw that last night. I was blown away. The bat kol came out and said this is halakha. Why? Because that's what the minhag is. If the minhag is that, so then you cannot assume that the halakha be kares the other way, and it's the opposite. It's a mitzvah, and it's to l'lamed zechut, to explain why it makes sense, even if you have to learn the sugya properly. And you have to come up with some kind of answer on your own. But clearly, if that's the minhag, then that is the truth. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Shita Shulchan Aruch is confusing because we see that he contradicts him. Some places he says you need 600, some places not. He holds that never came out of Safek. It's not clear. It's not clear what the Shita is, and he comes out that we'll see at the end of the shir what his exact is. But basically, he holds that a person could rely that the Shita Shulchan Aruch is that you need 600,000 and to be mekel on this question. Okay, well, let me go back to what the Or L'Tzion says that in terms of that we said before that you can make it tziruf. So the Shulchan, he wants to say that the answer for the Shulchan Aruch is that whenever it comes to a question of derabanan, the Shulchan Aruch is mekel. When it comes to deraita, he's machmir. So that's why in Siman Shimon Hey, when he's discussing how you make a Shurta Rabim, he doesn't tell you need 600,000. He says no, you don't need it. But over there, with regard to the woman carrying her jewelry, where it's a question, maybe she'll come to carry. It's a question derabanan. Maybe she'll do it. It's a chashash. Therefore, he's mekel because the question of derabanan. Therefore, she can wear her jewelry and she's definitely not doing anything wrong. Therefore, based on that, he wants to say that okay, so we can rely on any question of derabanan. You can rely on the opinion needs 600,000. For example, carrying with a shinui. If you do some kind of different type of carry with in a weird way, or even asking a non-Jew to carry for you, which is carrying midrabanan. You're not doing malacha derabanan, asking him to carry for you. Could also be under this category. Whenever it's a question of carrying midrabanan, you can rely that you need 600,000. Okay. Now, how do you configure 600,000? What is it? So the Shulchan Aruch says you need 600,000 passing every day. The Igorot Moshe Feinstein has a very interesting way of calculating it. On the one side, it comes out to be somewhat of a stringency, but there's also a tremendous leniency that comes out from it. He's coming to be machmir in Manhattan, in the city, and places in New York, but for Los Angeles, it comes out to be a leniency. He holds that 600,000 doesn't have to be only in the main street, as long as you have 600,000 on the grid. Okay, so you take a grid of a city. If you have 600,000 people that are traversing on the streets all at the same time, so the whole thing is Shurta Rabim. Meaning, without this hidush, you would say that each street is its own question. Is it open from side to side? Is it wide enough? You have enough people. Or Moshe holds that no, since all the streets open are all one big grid, so as long as there's 600,000 on the whole grid at the same time, so that's Shurta Rabim. And based on that, you yell that in Manhattan, you certainly have that, and therefore it's Shurta Rabim. And he was against making Eiruv over there. However, there's 2 points. First of all, he says that this has to be only in the space of Yud Beit Mil. What's Yud Beit Mil? Yud Beit Mil is the diameter of the encampment of the Jews in the desert. Okay, it encompassed 12. It was in diameter. So if you draw a circle around it, the diameter was 12 mil, which is about 8.5 miles. Okay, so if you have a circle with the diameter of 8.5 miles, and you have this amount of density in it, so it counts. And certainly if it's denser than that. However, if it's not as that dense, if it's bigger than that, if you have the 600,000, it won't make it. It will not make it Reshut Rabim because it's over too spread out of an area. And in order for that to be accomplished, he makes a cheshbon and to have around 3 million people populating that area, 12 mil by 12 mil, the 8.5 miles in diameter, in order to create this grid to be Reshut Rabim. So in Manhattan, where we had high rises, so there you definitely had the 3 million in the 12 mil diameter, and it was problematic. However, in places like Los Angeles, where you have so bit of hedge, you can all do it on your Google, not now, afterwards. How many people are in the entire city? And based on our small part of the city, it's certainly less than that for the cheshbon of 3 million to 12 mil. And therefore, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, we would not have that calculation of the 600,000 in one spot. Oh wait. It happens to be that he's the only one who says this, but he does say it. Yes, you can see for yourself when you do your cheshbon on Google. Oh wait. No. He makes a cheshbon that he says that if you have I wasn't clear. If you have 3 million people dwelling in a density of 8.5 mile radius, so then you will assume that you have 600,000 people on the street at the same time. If you have less than that density, you can assume that you don't have 600,000 people on the street at the same time, and you won't have Shishim people that way. Now, I'll just point out, I don't want to make it chas v'shalom not to trick anyone, that there's all the cheshbon of the roads. You also have to consider how many people go down the street. Meaning, even though the people that live there maybe don't create the 600,000, but you also have the people that are coming from outside the city and they're traveling through. So, and that adds to it. So I'm not exactly sure how to calculate that. That's trying to figure that out. The downtown people coming back and forth, all that. Okay, fine. Now, interesting, Shiloh. What about cars? We're talking about the 600. Who's called 600,000? A person is in a car. Will that count for the 600,000 or not? So there are some poskim want to say that no, they don't count for the 600,000. They're in a car. Why? What's the basis for that? For one, we could say that's what we mentioned before, that there's a roof. Something is a roof, so then that's automatically not Reshut Rabim, like we said before. The poskim say other svarot that if you're in a Shuta Yachid, if a car has the dimensions of Shuta Yachid, so then you can't create the Reshut Rabim based on your status. Many argue on this. You see what Shabbat, Yakabloy is arguing on this, but Rabbi Yehuda is very into the svara. He loves it. He thinks this is such a beautiful svara, and he goes with it. And it's interesting that there's a question brought up in the postscript about people coming in boats. People coming in a boat will count as the Rabbim, and seemingly they hold that a boat would count. So questionable if that would fit. But Rabbi Yehuda is very into the svara of this from the Shut Malko, that if you're in a car, that does not count for 600,000, which is a nice, if we have many kulot, so it's definitely a nice kulot in the pocket that you have, that the people in cars don't count for Shut Rabim. What's that? I saw someone mention boats. I don't remember if he talks about it. I don't remember. Right. Now let's get to Reshut Yachid, and then we'll get to Eiruv. So Yachid, like I said before, most poskim hold that Reshut Yachid has to have 3 walls. The Rambam says you need to have 4 walls. It's based on how he learns the Gemara about the size of Reshut Rabim. The Gemara says that the side of Reshut Rabim also has that status, and is talking about when someone takes his house in. Seemingly the area that he pulls back in now creates an area which has 3 walls. And nevertheless, the Gemara says that spot is Reshut Rabim. So even though you have 3 walls, nevertheless you're Reshut Rabim, and therefore he holds in order to be Reshut Yachid, you have to have 4 walls. Now in order to have the 4th wall, it doesn't have to be 4 full walls. The 4th wall perhaps could be just 1 little stick, and that will count. Now, there's a compromise opinion. Like I said before, most opinions hold 3 walls is enough to Reshut Yachid. And the 3rd wall, by the way, might be even just a 1 little stick. That might be enough to be Reshut Yachid. Like we have by Sukkah, everyone's familiar with the two walls and the little bit at the end. So we have a similar halakha on Shabbat that perhaps one pole called a lechi is a third wall for Shabbat. It's called Reshut Yachid. The Taz brings the other Rishonim that want to say to answer a certain Gemarot that it depends. If you're in a place where you're open to Reshut Rabim, in order to block yourself from Reshut Rabim, you have to have a fourth wall. In other words, if you're a three-wall structure and you're open to Reshut Rabim, like I told you that Gemara, that if a guy pulled his house in from the street, so now that enclave has three walls around it because he has the two other houses, and the surface of his house is now three walls. So since you're open to Reshut Rabim, you need a fourth wall. But if you're in the middle of a forest or a place which is not Reshut Rabim, so just three walls by itself will create Reshut Yachid. That's a compromise that someone will say. Now, Reshut Yachid is not just walls like walls of a house. It can also be a mound or a pillar, which is 10 tefachim tall, 4 tefachim wide. So we say that, let's say a person is on the Gemara calls it a tel or tel mitlakit. A person on a mound, which is a plateau. So the top of it has status of Reshut Yachid because we say that the walls extend upwards. Special halakha. It's like we have other halakha, some kind of halakha dynamic. It's as if the walls extend upwards. What about and therefore mountain sides could serve as walls? As we, it's a little bit more simple than the tail. But we'll just talk about Temet Lakeh. There's also a status. So in other words, over here, the bima, the top of this is a Reshut Yachid. It's 10 tefachim tall, 4 tefachim wide. So a person stands on top of it is in a Reshut Yachid. It's as if the walls extends upwards. Some say you don't need to say the walls extend. It's a Reshut Yachid by itself. The walls block from Reshut Rabim. So the top of this is a Reshut Yachid. Let's say you have a mound which has leaning walls. As long as the degree of the wall is not too flat, so it could be a Reshut Yachid as well. If it's at a 24 degree angle, so the Chazon Ish explains that it's as if it's straight. So if you have a mound that's you have like a hill or a mountainside, that is not a gradual incline, it's a steep incline. So that will create a mechitza. The Eiruv, in many areas where it relies partially on the walls of certain mountains, Small Pass, and a place near by the Hollywood Bowl, that they use a face of the mountain to serve as a mechitza. Why? Because it's not so steep. There was one time where I was going out on a Sunday morning with Rabbi Yehuda, and we were going to Small Pass. It's a treacherous hike. Shmuel, you did it once. No, the mountain. I don't think we did it ever. It was other time. So we were going. There's a chain link fence going along the mountainside, and then he looks at us and he says, "No, you notice anything? This is my first tutorial." And then we look a little closer. We say, "Oh, there's about 200 feet of fence missing." And last time I checked, that's pasul. So what do you do now? Clearly, there was some kind of landslide from rain or something that just totally took down the chain link fence that was going along the. No one cares because it's in the middle of nowhere. It's on face the mountainside. But don't worry, it wasn't a problem because it was along the side of the mountain, and we measured it. We took a few minutes to measure it, and it worked out. Even though it was slanted, but it was steep enough, and it encompassed the whole area of the break. And Baruch Hashem, there was no problem. It has to be around 24 degrees. The Gemara says that tel mitlakeh is Reshut Yachid if it's traverses 4 amot by the time you get up to 10. It goes up 10 tefachim by the time you get to 4 amot. So that's called straight enough to have the stat, which is not so much. It's not such a steep incline. 24 degrees is not so good. It's not so steep. Many times in the checking, we'll see fences which are crushed or bent. A car went into a fence all over the place. So as long as the fence is not so bent downwards, so it's like it's straight, it's a Reshut Yachid and it doesn't lose the status of a mechitza. Now sometimes it's bent in the middle, and that's you have to measure each spot. It's all adds up. So that makes Eruv checking interesting. Which fence? That one? No, it's still the same way. I've seen it already 3 times since then. Exactly the way they left it. Okay, now you get to hear the dark side of the Eruv. Okay. Oh, it's recorded. Okay. Howard will forgive me. Okay. Fine. Now, in order for the walls to be Reshut Yachid, it can't have breaks which will make it render it invalid. If any break which is less than 3 tvachim, which is 9 inches, let's say around 9 inches, so it's not a break at all. We say lavud is as if it's satum. Okay, a small break. We put 3 fists together or around 3. Right, it's let's say a tefach is around 3 inches, so 9 inches, a little bit more than that, is called lavud, and it's as if it's closed. We're all familiar that b'nei Torah, we're all familiar with that in Hilchot Sukkah. The lavud is like it's only closed, and it's not a break at all. Sometimes a break of 4 tvachim is a problem. A break of 10 amot in a wall will render it invalid no matter what, if it's 10 amot, which is somewhere between 15 and 20 feet, which is not so common, but there's a caveat, because in order for a mechitza to be kosher, you have to have more wall than break. That's another halakha. So it has to be less than 10 amot of a break, or sometimes less than four tvachim of a break. But no matter what, you also have to have more wall than open area. And for example, we'll just use the Eiruv as an example. When you're going along a fence and you want to make sure that it's not broken, so you have to make sure there's 2 things. Number 1 is that it's not more than 10 amot, and even if it's not more than 10 amot, we have to make sure. Shmuel will tell you about this. That the two pieces line up. So if you take the mechitza back here as an example, and you knock out the middle one, so it'll still be kasher because the middle mechitza is less than 15 feet. So you still have what's called omen meruba al harutz. You have more amud than break, so it'll be kasher. However, if let's say this piece was scooched back significantly, that the 2 sides would not line up, they would look like this. So then the Chazon Ish explains, and I haven't seen anyone who straight out argues, that you lose your power of omen meruba. Omen meruba means that it's as if the wall extends from where it is, so it has to go straight to something. If it doesn't hit something, so then you lost your power of omen meruba. When you say 4 tvachim, when you say 10 amot, so the Gemara says it depends if it's a chatzer or it's a mavui. They're complicated, but basically, if it's a place where people don't go through the break, it's a place where it's blocked by something, or people don't go because of it's not so fun to go through that break. So then it could be bigger than 4 tvachim. If it's easy, if people go through it, we have in the air many times. Homeless people sometimes they'll make a break in a fence, and that will be their way to get to the bus stop or something like that. So that could create a big problem. So then even 4 tvachim is big enough to be broken, but under normal circumstances, if it's not a place where people go through, it could go up to 15 feet to be a break, which is very uncommon, which is why even when we find breaks in the mechitza of the Eiruv, it's usually not a problem.
How about the exits of the highway? In other words, first, does the Eiruv use the walls of the highway? And yes, then that would be the question.
Okay, so just to speak about now, the way that the Eiruv works is, like we mentioned in the beginning of the shiur, that utilizes the walls of the freeways to create the Eiruv, which makes it Reshut Yachid. The walls are made up of 2 parts. There's the chain link fence, and then there's the sound wall. Chain link fence everyone's familiar with. It's a crisscross fence that Caltrans so lovingly put up for us. They didn't realize they won't get any credit for it because they didn't have any to run it for us. They had an intention for themselves, so they don't get any credit. But they did it for us. There's also the sound wall along the freeway. If you never heard of a sound wall, but you've seen it many times. It's a big brick wall that goes along the freeway, so the people on the other side could sleep at night and not have to listen to the cars. It's called a sound wall because it blocks the sound. So the chain link many times will connect to sound wall. Sometimes we'll make some connection to connect them. But like Arav pointed out, no matter what, a freeway fence or sound wall needs to stop because there are underpasses, there's exits, there's places where it stops and it continues on the other side. So the break almost always is more than 10 amot between the 2 sides, and they certainly don't line up, right? They're like, who knows, like this could be anywhere. So for all of the on ramps and off ramps and overpasses, the Eiruv put up the Tzurat Pesach. They put up you have either natural or they put up poles. Sometimes you have natural poles, and they will either use also natural or they'll put up a string or something that will create a halakhic doorpost, and that counts as a wall. Planning to get into that soon, but that's basically the dynamic of the Eiruv. Now, I do believe the Shittat Rambam is that in order for a Tzurat Pesach to work, it can never be more than 10 amot, but could be it's only the Rabbanan. So that's beyond the scope of this year. Good point. That's how that works. Fine. So moving right along. Okay, also very interesting is if the wall is broken on the bottom, just in other words, you see a whole wall, but the bottom is broken. So will that invalidate it? So the Gemara says that if a little goat could get under the wall, so basically the wall doesn't work. That's called Bekiyat Gidim. If it's open 3 times, so you see on the fence, this mechitza over here, that's a little bit elevated over the ground, but it's not 9 inches, so it's still kosher if you want to use it as your area wall, because it's not 3 tefachim off the ground. So there are places, however, that the Eiruv will use the side of a bridge as a mechitza. So it's called in halacha called a mechitza tuliyai, hanging wall. Even if the wall itself is 10 tefachim, but if it's hanging off the ground, so people can get through it, no problem. So what's the answer? How can you use a bridge as a wall? Use the wall that's going along the bridge. So the answer is, if you stand on the bridge, the wall that you see goes to the ground, and people are going under the ground. So in other words, it's all about a point of reference. If a little goat comes, say here, through the mechitza, so that's a problem. But if it goes underground, it doesn't bother me. If there's a garage under here, it doesn't bother me because my Rishut Yachid is over here. So that's the same thing. That's the answer for all the bridges. So it really depends on which side you're standing on. That's what comes out. Okay. Now, what is Eiruv? That's the question you all came to find out about. So an Eiruv is a Rishut Yachid on a place that otherwise would be usher to carry. Okay, somehow we have to create an Rishut Yachid. There's another thing called Eiruv Chatzerot, which I'm not going to talk about basically at all. But just so you understand, the word Eiruv comes from Eiruv Chatzerot. Okay, the fact that we have a structure that makes something Rishut Yachid is not called Eiruv. Eiruv, the word itself comes from the idea that even if you have walls, but if you have different private domains that are open to each other, you still midirabanan cannot carry from one private domain to another private domain. So for that, you do what's called Eiruv Chatzerot. That's where the word Eiruv came from. Fine. That's the different elements of Eiruv that we're not getting into today. Now, the halacha depends. If you have an area which is normally a Carmelit or normally a Rishut Rabim, it's gonna make all the difference in the world. If you have an area which is normally Carmelit, let's say you don't have 600,000, let's say you don't, according to those opinions, let's say that's 16 amot, fine, so it's a Carmelit. Now, according to everyone, it's very simple to make Eiruv, okay? You could just put up what we call a Tzurta Pesach, and you're good. Like we said before, what's a Tzurta Pesach? You have a doorway, something in halacha which counts as a doorway, is like, mamash, like a full solid wall. How do you create a Tzurta Pesach? If you want to build one in your yard is a Carmelit, you want to make a Tzurta Pesach in your yard to carry in your front yard, so your wives can hang out there on Shabbat. You'll get some tools, go to the lumber store. You'll need a pole, which is 10 tefachim tall, which is strong enough to hold even the smallest of doors. Okay, doesn't sway in the wind. You need 2, right, to make a doorpost. And then just like